All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here recording a little bit later than usual. It's Thursday evening here. So we're recording Thursday evening for our February 8th episode right now. And we're getting ourselves ready for Super Bowl. Lots of loose ends we're just tying up here, getting ready for the big event on Sunday. We're fired up. We're excited. Lots of prizes, lots of things prepared, lots to be excited for. So we'll get into the episode. This episode, we're going to be announcing our 306 Fantasy Football Award winners for the 2023 season, and then we'll go into our FanDuel and our pick'ems for the Super Bowl. But before we get started, we'll say hello to the fellas, and then we'll get into the episode. So last week we didn't have Armand. This week we did some finagling. Unfortunately, I had interviews this week, so we had to move some things around to make sure that we had everybody involved here, and we got Armand back this week. So Armand. What's been keeping you busy here the last little bit, and I guess getting excited for the big game this weekend.
Well, yeah, as the NFL season is wrapping up, so is the basketball season for the junior basketball program here. And so excited for some free time, but also a little sad because it's been a heck of a season for my boys. We've only lost 5 games all season, and they've been against good competition when we lost them in good games. So yeah, that's been awesome. And then my wife has a total for what she was able to raise through her cross stitching for the charity this year. And I think it was $660 is what she ended up raising. And she's going to be presenting you that money on Sunday at the Super Bowl there, Jordan.
Yeah, unreal work. We talked about this, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago when we talked about that she's. It might have been longer than that. Jeez, some of these weeks are starting to blend together. But she's talking how she came up with the idea. She messaged us and said, "Hey, I'm looking to do this. Would this work?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, like I mean, it could be $40. Like you can make $40, and $40 helps us to get towards our goal." But when she texted us in our group, where she's like, "Yeah, it's a number I'm pretty excited about, and but I don't want to ruin the surprise. I'll tell you guys later once it's all settled and whatnot." But yeah, 660 that is tremendous work, especially when you consider that our goal this year was $2,500. That is a substantial amount towards the direction of obviously hitting our goal. So that's awesome work. And Armand, you I think you owe her a couple massages or coffee runs, or like putting the kids to bed and let her kick her feet up for the work she did for not only the podcast but for a good cause as well too. Like I know I'm taking up a little bit of time here, but I know Armin too. Like this is a big event for not only the podcast, but for us too. Like for those of you listening at home, myself and my wife, we had a long duration stay at the hospital here in Prince Albert, and that room that we're donating to helped us along the way. But you and your wife had a pretty decent stay earlier this year as well too.
Yeah, we were there for probably close to a week as well. And yeah, that room was incredible. It was a great way to get away from the hospital. Like when you're in that room, like it doesn't feel like you're in the hospital anymore. And that's just a great feeling to have, like you're around those beeping machines all the time and kind of like just the hospital feeling of it all, and to be able to go into that room and to feel like you're not in the hospital, that you're just kind of at someone's house is a really great feeling that kind of lets you lower your stress a bit and kind of be able to focus on your kids a little bit more.
Yeah, get up in the morning and grab a coffee or some cereal or a coffee and a little dainty or a bagel or something. Go back to your room, and you need a break or you need something, you go and watch some TV, read a book, play with the toys. Like it's an escape from your reality. And unfortunately, when you're there, it's not for the best of reasons. And it's a high stress situation when you're dealing with your kids and you're dealing with illnesses that maybe you're unfamiliar with or unsure of what the end result's going to be. But we were talking about it with some family friends, and it was one of those rooms where you don't need it until you need it, and when you need it, you definitely need it. So like
Yeah.
the obviously the work that we're doing here, it's small potatoes in a grand scheme of what it takes to operate a room like that. But every little bit helps, and be able to provide food and treats and snacks and games and whatever, and just keeping that room operating because lots of families like us in our situation and that are in there every single day. We're just there for a small glimpse of what some of these families are in there for, and every day that area is full. So it can be
Well,
awesome to
I
figure out
I
what our
remember when
total's
I
going to be.
was there was a, a lady in with her child, and they had to come regular. Like they're in the hospital like once a month, once every few weeks, just for checkups with her kid, and they use that room all the time. They're regulars. Like, I couldn't imagine what it'd be like for them having to go in there all the time without that room.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what the grand total is, and I have high expectations we're going to surpass our goal. So it's going to be very, very cool to see what that end number is, and an emotional day. Obviously, going back to the hospital to make the donation. Like I went there just the other day just to drop off some posters and talk to the lady about, the event coming up, and just walking through that hallway. For those who are unfamiliar, it's on the Peds ward in Prince Albert, and it's at the very end. Like you have to walk through the whole Peds ward to get to this room, and you walk through there and there's people screaming, people crying, the sirens, not sirens, but like the buzzers and the bells and everything from the rooms are going off, and it's just like, oh my god, I remember this like this was yesterday. This is so stressful walking through here, and obviously we're removed from that from 8 months ago. Like, and there's people that are in there every single day, so it'll be an awesome day to be able to go and donate that, and give back to our community, and give back to something that obviously means so much to Armin and I and our families. So anyways, we'll get into the episode here. We'll talk about a little bit more about the donation stuff next episode when we wrap up the podcast for the year, and take a bit of a well-deserved break. But we'll get into the quick question, and this is a simple one. Okay, simple one. Who's the Super Bowl MVP? This is a quarterback award. Always has been, seems to always have been, always will be. A couple off times we've seen the running back. We've seen Cooper Kupp in recent memory. We've seen some defensive players, Ray Lewis in, was it 2016, right? So you'll see the odd time where it's not a quarterback, but predominantly a quarterback award. So very, very interesting to see where we'll go with this one. And we'll start things off with Zach. Zach, quarterback award, or are you pivoting?
I think the easy money would be on a quarterback, whether it's Mahomes for doing not much, but just getting it because he's Mahomes, or Brock Purdy having the game of his life.
He already got one of those. Damian Williams was the MVP. I stand by that. I stand
yeah.
by.
I mean, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking the script, as I had it earlier in the season, was thrown in the bin.
Here we go.
It's now time for the new script.
New
Travis Kelce, Super Bowl MVP. Taylor comes sprinting down the stairs, jumps into his arms, proposes to Taylor, center field, doesn't have a ring, of course, presents her with whatever the trophy is for Super Bowl MVP. That's the wedding ring. They take that Super Bowl MVP home, melt it down. That's the ring.
He plays that whole game with an engagement ring in his jock. You heard it here first. So I'll just add on to your story there, Zach. But I can see it.
Yeah.
It's funny because you can bet on it right now whether you think he'll be proposing at the end of the game. Like that's a prop line, like on betting markets.
Oh,
for
man.
sure it is.
Like
of
she is eating up into the betting markets, and it's so funny. Like people are freaking out. Oh, Taylor Swift is ruining football. It's like, no, like you show famous people during football games all the time, and she has engaged such a huge market of people that would have never ever sniffed a football game in their entire life. Like, say what you want, but she's doing a lot for the game of football, and it's like, oh, she's ruining football.
Well, it's not like she's being obnoxious either.
No,
like,
you want to know who ruins football? Brittany Mahomes. Okay, like it could be Brittany Mahomes here, but Taylor Swift, she's being a good ambassador and bringing lots of people on football. Like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't change the fact I'm still watching the game. Like, so they show her on TV. Like, who cares? It's unbelievable. But Zach, Travis Kelce pivoting and not going with the quarterback award. So Armand, are you QB award, or are you pivoting as well?
You know what? The way I see it, if San Fran wins, it's gonna be CMC having a monster game, and CMC's got to win it. You know what? That's my prediction. If San Fran wins, and I think they will, I'm saying it right now, and I think it's gonna be CMC all the way, baby. Unless it's somehow CMC only gets like 50 yards on the ground and then like 100 through the air. Then I'll give it to Brock Purdy.
That's what I'm curious, if he gets 0 rushing touchdowns, but he gets 2 receiving touchdowns, but then also Purdy throws another 2 to, like, 1 to Debo and 1 to Ayuk, then it's like, okay, 4 touchdowns through the air. Then it's like, but I don't know. I went with you, Armin. I put CMC slash Mahomes because I just could not decide. I couldn't decide at first. Honestly, I can't decide who I'm going to pick to win this game. Like it's so up in the air. But I went CMC. I'm going to pick CMC. I'm going to go with you, Armin, as well. I just think I'm picking San Francisco to win. I'm picking San Francisco, and if San Francisco wins, CMC is the best player on the field. I think it buys into the narrative too of so many people are saying, Brock Purdy is not the man. Brock Purdy is not the answer. Brock Purdy is not the top end quarterback. He's a game manager. He's support cast to a plethora of offensive weapons. And I think that if they win and CMC has a good game, that narrative is going to seep into the MVP candidates too, right? Like it's very similar to me when Stafford and Cup, they won the Super Bowl. Stafford had a good game, but a lot of the work was obviously done by Cup. I think Stafford threw for two touchdowns, one interception, and both those touchdowns were to Cup, I think. No, check that.
OBJ scored one, didn't he?
OBJ scored one, yeah. And then Cup got one, but Cup had like 179 and one or something like that. So
Yeah.
so I think it could be something like that where Purdy still has a good game, but CMC is buying into the narrative that CMC was the team. He's the offense. He's gonna be voted tonight the offensive player of the year. So that's I think CMC as well. It's hard not to say Mahomes. It's hard not, like I said, it's hard not to bet against KC. It's hard not to pick Mahomes, and that may be the script, but we'll see on that one. But anyways, we got the Super Bowl coming up. I've already mentioned the Super Bowl watch party on Sunday at Rockshore Event Center. Hope to see you there. We got great prizes, Milwaukee drill sets. We got signed helmets, signed jerseys. We've got 306 fantasy football product. We've got 22 fresh product. We have product coming in from Phantom Light Distillery. We've got product coming in from Fresh Air Experience. We got product coming in like crazy. So it's going to be an awesome event. We're very excited. It's a catered event. In the year past, my buddy that hosted it, they made the food themselves. But this year it's going to be super awesome because they ended up pulling in a caterer to do the food, and the caterer is doing like appy type food, Super Bowl football type foods. So that's going to be an awesome experience. Funky Fresh is from Prince Albert, so the food's going to be fantastic. Looking forward to this event. It's one of our big fundraisers of the year. But San Francisco versus Kansas City, I'm sure it will not disappoint. Anyhow, we'll get into our 2023 306 Fantasy Football Awards. We talked about the nominations. A little bit about this. We'll just recap the award and then the nominees, and then we'll announce who the winner was. And this is all, out of our hands, much the same as you guys. We all have one vote. We vote. Everybody else on social media, they vote, and it comes from the votes of the people. So this isn't like, you like this player best or you hate this player. No, this is the votes of the people. So we'll start things off with the biggest bust, and Armin's going to take care of this one.
All right. So the nominees, just for a refresh, for biggest bust of the year for 2023 were Austin Ekeler, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, and Patrick Mahomes. And after all the voting is in, it is Austin Ekeler is this year's biggest bust of 2023. Give your hands up. Let's give him a round of applause. Way to go, Austin Ekeler. You let everybody down this season, including myself.
The award that nobody wants to win.
Yeah, this one was my vote as well. He was a high first round draft pick that ended up performing at way below standards all season long. He was injured for a little bit, but even when he was back from injury, his games were minimal. And his biggest game of the season was just a fraction of what his biggest game of previous seasons has been. So yeah, Austin Ekeler, you're the bust of the year. How close was the vote there on that one, Jordan?
That one was not close. And you know what? Tony Pollard made it a bit of a game. Lots of people voted for Tony Pollard. A lot of people are really disappointed with him. But Austin Ekeler smashed this one. This was not much of a race.
One, like what I'll have to say about like Mahomes being in there, he was a bit of a disappointment this year. But I think the whole quarterback position was, and like he was still in with the top tier quarterbacks as far as points go. So it was kind of a wash with that one, I think, with Patrick Mahomes. But you did kind of have to put his name in there because he was getting drafted first, and a lot of people did. hope for better things.
Yeah. The next one, this one was a little bit tighter. Once again, I don't know if you'll be too surprised with the winner, but the margin was a lot closer than the other one. But we have the waiver wire stud, which Zach will be taking care of.
Yeah, I'm interested to find out how close this this vote was. The nominees were Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Sam Laporta, and Nico Collins. All very deserving of being the waiver wire stud, somebody that in most regular drafts would have went undrafted. And based on your votes, the winner was Kyron Williams. I was looking at his ADP from August and September. He was the running back 40, 125th player overall based on Fantasy Pros data. And I would venture to guess he was undrafted in most leagues based on that RB 40 position. And anytime you can get a top 5 running back off the waiver wire, I think that that was easily the reason why he won this award. Lots of value there with Puka, Laporta, and Collins, but having that like top 5 running back come off the waiver wire was, to me at least, a pretty easy vote.
Yeah, Kyron won by quite a bit. A little bit closer than the last one. I think a couple people messaged and said too, like, hey, like Puka, something like he was drafted in quite a bit of league, especially if you're in a bit of a deeper league, or drafted later, right? Like him popping off on some of the radars a little bit. So I think that played into it a little bit more. But Kyron Williams wasn't drafted, and his impact was massive. So that one once again wasn't much of a surprise.
I even picked him off the waiver wire in Dynasty. Like that's how far off the radar he was.
Like he's a true waiver wire wonder, that guy. This one, biggest week, I'll take care of this one. And this one's I always find it interesting because in the years past, the votes, lots of times it just goes to the guy who had like the most amount of fantasy points, just because, the biggest week, the most points, easy done. But in this week, or this season, sorry, HN had the most points in week 3, 49.3 points. But it's week 3. Really, like, lost teams at that point. You could have been 0-3 or 0-2, I guess. You could have been 1-1. You could have been 2-0. There wasn't a huge impact. Like, you would have won that week, but there's still lots of fantasy season left. So the voting was a little bit different this year, and we had DJ Moore, the first candidate, in week 5 where he put up 45 fantasy points. We had Achan previously mentioned in week 3 where he put 49.3. We had CMC. We talked about that he had a couple weeks where he could have been on here, but his biggest one was in week 4 for 45.2 points. And we also had Amari Cooper's week 16 where he put up 46 points. And this year, the winner went to Amari Cooper, who was not the number 1 point getter of the 4, but the amount of points that he put up and the impact of the week. He put up, like I said, 11 receptions for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he also had a 2-point convert as well. The kicker went down in that game, so they went for 2. Putting up for 46 points. And in week 16, like, that's your semifinal matchup. So not only was it a big week, like, points wise, but also was a big week for putting your team over the edge. And last week when we talked about with Zach, I said, like, I will hate him forever because I single-handedly lost my semifinal matchup in Dynasty because of him. And that's just how big of an impact it was. Like, I couldn't tell you if I played against HN in week 3. I don't remember. I couldn't tell you if I played against CMC in week 4, but I can sure as heck tell you that I played against Amari Cooper in week 16. I think that played into the effect for a lot of people voting for this one.
Yeah, not to mention he probably wasn't your wide receiver 1 if you played him.
No, and like that was not a smash matchup. Like, yeah, you could have seen that he was gonna have a good matchup against Houston, but it wasn't like, oh, he's gonna blow up, and that's what happened. So yeah, like I said, won't forget that one. Next award here, we have the Playoff Hero Award, and we'll go around the horn back to Armin for this one.
All right, so the nominations for this one were Christian McCaffrey, who was RB1, RB2, and RB22 throughout the playoff run. Kyron Williams, who was RB5, 11, and 1 throughout the playoffs. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was wide receiver 5, 8, and 7 throughout the playoffs. And then James Conner, who was RB11, 5, and 3 throughout the playoffs. This one is also a very interesting one to see how people kind of value it. Is it The guy who gives you the championship? Is it the guy who gets you all the way to the chip, but may not have had the best? Or is it the guy who just like overall puts up the most points throughout the playoffs? Or is it the guy who is the most consistent throughout? And kind of looking at the way it fell here, it kind of looks like the guy who is the most consistent throughout. The other three candidates all had either a one or had a top three finish in their position throughout the playoffs, but then they also had a finish that was outside of the top 10 throughout the 3 weeks of the playoffs. Whereas Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jordan's favorite receiver, which made me question whether or not this was actually voted on.
That's why I gave the disclaimer at the start.
Yeah. But he was consistent. He didn't have any top three finishes, but 5, 8, and 7. He was super consistent throughout the playoffs. Was a wide receiver one every playoff matchup. And I still think he put up pretty decent points, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So it does make sense that Amon-Ra is a playoff hero for most managers out there who had him, because you could just plug and play him and you could depend on him. And he didn't nerf any of your weeks, but he definitely made sure that you were in a good position every single week to come out victorious.
Okay, it was so wild to think he finished as the wide receiver 3 on the season. I didn't even realize. I know he had a good year, but in that week 15, it was 20, and then 22 and 19. So he had a great week. But to help the argument here, Armin, I didn't vote for Amon-Ra. I'm gonna go back to the docket here. I actually voted for James Conner, RB11, 5, and 3, just because I had him in another league, and RB11 obviously helped me get through the quarterfinal, and then smashed in the semifinal and the final. So I actually voted for James Conner. He wasn't the winner, but I mean, I'm pretty happy with Amon-Ra winning this one too. So I'll take that for what it's worth. Zach has the next one. That, by the way, that vote was like very spread out. Like the votes were kind of all over the place for all 4. We talked about that there. That was probably likely going to happen, but a fun vote nonetheless. Zach got the next one, the draft day sleeper. This one we talked about too, that there's some big names in here. So Zach will take care of that one.
Yeah, the draft day sleeper, somebody that underappreciated on draft day, but after the draft, you're awfully happy to have them come the end of the season. The nominees here were James Cook, who was drafted as RB29, Mike Evans, wide receiver 33, Rachaad White, RB27, and Raheem Mostert, RB37. And for me, at least, I thought this one was pretty obvious. The winner, deservedly so, was Raheem Mostert. He was good for RB2 on the season. Drafted as the 37th running back, finished as the number 2. Outstanding value there. Just looked at the half-point PPR points on the season for skill players. He was the 5th best player for overall points, excluding quarterbacks, of course. So huge value there. How are those votes?
Yeah, that Raheem Mostert smashed. But like I was looking at it too, like if you take Mostert out of the mix here, that's an even race. Like really, who are you gonna vote for? James Cook, Mike Evans, Rachaad White? I personally would lean Mike Evans. I think he was a screaming value, but Raheem ran away with this one. Like Raheem, this is a no-brainer. Finishes the RB2, and he was the lowest on the draft list out of the 4 here. So this is a no-brainer. But if you take him out of there, that's a tough one. Like that's an interesting list. So I think there's some guys that were very deserving, but this was a no-brainer on that one. Our last award here, the fantasy MVP. I'll take care of this one. And like a little disclaimer, a couple people were upset that Tyreek Hill was not in here. I think he finished as the wide receiver 2. And in points per game, he was behind CD. So I mean, obviously, I think CD would have been more deserving than Tyreek. But there's some people that were a little bit upset that that Tyreek was not in the top 4 for this running. But our fantasy MVP, all things considered, going into this, the draft capital, as well as the finish and like how valuable were they to your team, et cetera, et cetera. Had Kyren Williams, who finished as the RB4 and averaged 19.8 points per game. We have Christian McCaffrey, who finished as the RB1 and averaged 22.2 points per game. Raheem Mostert, who was the RB2 and averaged 16.6 points per game. And then CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver 1, who averaged 19.0 points per game. Excuse me. And this one was very close, spread across the board. But at the end of the day, there was one guy that reigned supreme. I think he was on Sleeper, put out a stat. It was like 42% or something like that, or 36%. I'm trying to remember the number of championship teams. And that's Christian McCaffrey. He got you there. He had a bit of a tough week 17, but weeks 15, 16, he was number 1, 2. And for a lot of the season, he was the RB1, 2 throughout the week. So Christian McCaffrey ended up winning this one. It was a closer race than I anticipated, but CMC is your 2023 fantasy MVP. So thank you everybody at home who voted for that. Obviously, if you didn't vote, we wouldn't be able to do that segment, or we just be picking our favorite players, and that would be that. But we'll get into playoff pick'ems, and then we have our DFS, and that'll wrap up our episode here. So one game left to pick. We have myself at 8-4, Armin 8-4, and Zach at 7-5, and we're going to be picking who is going to be the Super Bowl champion. So we'll start things off here with Armand. Armand, you're sitting at 8-4. We have KC, the 3 seed, taking on San Francisco, the 1 seed. And who are you gonna be picking with this one?
I'm going with San Francisco. It was hard to bet against them being just like a little bit more polished than KC has been the last little bit. They may not have Mahomes, who can take over a game by himself, but they do have CMC, who is capable of doing that as much as a running back can in this day and age. And then a very solid defense that I'm expecting they're going to have a good game plan and be ready to go. They're going to be hungry for it. And Casey's coming off a lot of long playoff runs and may not be necessarily as hungry as San Fran has been the last little bit here.
Zach, are you jumping on that one, or do you got different plans?
Well, when I filled in the docket a few days ago, I had the Niners as my pick. But then as you guys were talking about pre-show stuff, we were going over stuff, I looked and I saw I'm behind you guys by 1 game. I gotta do what I can here to make it competitive, because even if the Niners win, I'm still a game behind you guys. So I'm going to go for the tie here, taking Kansas City. I don't know. Travis Kelce wins the MVP. Only way he wins that MVP is if they win. He's getting that trophy. Him and Taylor are going to have the craziest proposal ever. It's going to be
shocking wedding.
It's going to be 13s everywhere.
Unreal. Yeah, I already said the top episode. I'm going San Francisco. I'm having a hard time with this one. I think like this is as close to a coin flip game as you can get, but at the end of the day, I'm like, who do I want to cheer for? And as much as it breaks my heart they beat the Lions, I'm going to cheer for San Francisco, because it's easier to say, we lost to the team that won, and I already know we're better than KC, beat them already, so can't let them have satisfaction. Start the year with the loss, end the year with the loss, KC, so suck on that one. Let's go San Francisco, CMC, big game. Let's rock and roll with that. So going into our DFS, final DFS, I think this is all but over but the crying. It's just a matter of which one of the losers between me and Armin are going to be buying Zach a plate of nachos or something here at the Super Bowl party, or whatever we decided the punishment was going to be. I can't remember, but Zach's sitting with 6 points. He's got 3 big W's. I have 1 second place finish. Armin has 2 second place finishes. So we got 6-2-1. And like I said, this DFS is a little bit different. The way this one operates, it's 5 spots. You have 1 spot as the MVP, but their points count as 1.5 of their points. So it's a bigger position. And then the rest of the 4 are a flex. You can go defenses, you can go kickers, you can go literally anything. So a little bit of a different setup for this one. So I think just the easiest way to do this, we'll go through and we'll name our MVPs, and then we'll just go through our team shortly after that, just because I think there's gonna be some carryover instead of kind of going back and forth. We'll all MVPs, talk about our teams, and then we can kind of go from there, I suppose. So I guess Zach, you're in first place. Zach, you're in first place by a lot. This is locked up. You might as well lead us out here and tell us who you got for your MVP.
So I think the easy money for the MVP would have been CMC. I think we can all agree that if anybody's going to have a bizarro stat line, it's going to be him. But that price tag was too much. I couldn't get the players that I wanted, so had to take him off the list. And I've said it twice now. The MVP of my team, the MVP of the Super Bowl, Travis frickin' Kelce. 13,000 points. 13,000.
Cheap as borscht. Armin, who's your MVP?
All right. I went with him for my MVP. Talked about San Fran winning and who's going to have bizarro stats, as Zach put it so eloquently. CMC is my MVP, 17,500. And yeah, it cost me a lot, which means I had to do a bit of adjustment. Couldn't quite get the guys I wanted on my roster because of it. But I'm pretty happy with how it unfolded afterwards still anyways.
Yeah, I got CMC too, but the rest of my team is very bad. It's really bad. I have 1,000 left over in Fab, but like I thought it was being sneaky. I was gonna put Mahomes as my MVP because like quarterback stats, you want whoever has gonna be the biggest points to be able to be your MVP. But I went CMC trying to think I was being sneaky, but I guess not. So we'll go back to Zach. Zach, go through your team, hammer it through, and then we'll discuss things after. So you got Kelce as your MVP. Who did you take as your 4 flexes?
This is your last chance that you guys could put your Butker or you could put your Jennings as your MVP. I wouldn't object if you guys wanted to make that change right now.
The rest of my team is so bad because I went CMC, but here we are. We're living the dream.
So my approach to this build was like, I'm not looking for any knockout punches. I'm not looking for any home runs, but I'm looking for like doubles. I'm looking for triples here. And I went with so Kelce as the MVP, who I think that's a pretty safe bet. And then I just went with like the next safest bets, in my opinion. So I went with Pacheco. I can see him having a pretty big game. Granted, that Niners defense is stout, but I think Pacheco has sneakily become a pretty big piece of that KC offense. He was 12,500. Next, I went with Deebo Samuel, 11,500. Rashee Rice, 11,000. And Brandon Ayuk, 10,500. Those are obviously all receivers. 2 for the Niners and 1 for the Chiefs. I have both teams' supposed number 1 receiver, and between Deebo and Ayuk, that's 1A, 1B. So very happy with how that team looks. Obviously, would have liked to have had CMC, but I think the value there for those guys was pretty exceptional.
Armin, you're in second place, so you might as well go through yours, and then I'll bring up the rear.
All right. So yeah, I kind of continued on with trying to take some big swings here. So I went Mahomes with 15,000, and then Ayuk for 10,500. I figured might as well, after getting the best San Fran offensive weapon. I think Ayuk has kind of quietly become the next best option on offense for the 49ers, as good as Deebo is. Ayuk has kind of got that more big playability in the passing game, and teams don't quite key in on him as much, and he doesn't get worn down throughout as much the game because he's not getting those high impact touches that Deebo gets. Then I went with MVS as a cheap option at $7,500, but he quietly had some decent games in the playoffs here, and maybe the Super Bowl will finally be his time to shine. And then to round it all off, I took a kicker, and I went with Harrison Butker at $9,500 as just like kind of a insurance piece. They're gonna kick a few field goals. he's gonna get a few points. He's not gonna put me up 20 or anything, but at least I get a little bit of home cooking.
I hope he kicks 0 field goals and misses his PATs just for taking a kicker. Oh man, sorry. Continue.
That was it. That's
Oh,
all.
that's it. Okay,
That's
sorry.
my team.
Oh man, sorry. I got to bust you for taking a kicker just because nobody else did, but predominantly because I couldn't afford a kicker. That's how bad my team is. So Armin goes, yeah, I got MVS at a discount at 7,500. I have 2 players that are actually cheaper than MVS. That's how bad my roster construction here is. But so I went CMC at MVP, but I was, like I said, I was flip-flopping between him and Mahomes, but I knew I wanted to have both in the lineup. So I got CMC at 1750 as my, or 17,500 as my MVP. Then I got 15,000 Mahomes in my flex. That was a no-brainer. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to sprinkle around some of the possible receiving options for KC. I'm with Zach. I think Kelsey's going to have a huge game. Kelsey is going to be the primary receiver. So I was, you know what, I'm going to stack the primary and then take a random shot at, a guy that could randomly get a touchdown or a deep pass. So that was the idea of my roster construction. So I got Kelsey at 13,000 as well. So 3 really big ticket items. So then that meant I had to dumpster dive for my other 2. So I ended up going with Jennings for 7,000, who I thought, is a bit of a sneaky one for San Francisco. There's a good chance he puts up 0 points for 0 receptions, and that is very likely. But at 6,500, or at 7,000, it's a shot in the dark. It's a hope for the best. Debo is nicked up, so who knows? Maybe he, goes down to an early injury as he did in the not wild card weekend. The divisional round. That is in the cards. Maybe they have some trick plays for Jennings. Maybe he's a deep threat with an Ayuk underneath. There's lots of creativity that can happen. So 7,000, worse things can happen. And then even cheaper than that, I went Justin Watson at 6,500. There's random moments where Justin Watson gets big plays in the red zone. He's a red zone threat for some weird, spontaneous, random reason. So it was one of those ones where I didn't have money options, and a guy that's gets targeted in the red zone, who knows? Maybe he gets that random catch from Mahomes. I double dip on the Mahomes touchdown and a Watson touchdown. So after looking at all the roster constructions, mine and Armin's look pretty similar, and obviously genuinely concerned about Zach's, as I should be, as he's won 3 weeks in a row. But we're swinging for the fences here. I'm in last place, so I got to make things happen. I got to get first place. That's the only way I can surpass Armin. So make some things happen. But we're going to wrap this one up here. Just going to prelude a couple things. Next week, we have our wrap-up episode of the Super Bowl, of everything, our thank yous, and then we take a well-deserved hiatus from the podcast for a bit to recharge the batteries, and then we wait for free agency and everything to kick back up and get ready for the draft, etc. And then we get back into going things. But we have one big day left. We got Sunday. We got the podcast charity event here. We got Super Bowl prop bets. Those are out there. If you want the link, let us know. We'll fire you the link. $25 to charity, win some signed memorabilia, 22 fresh stuff, and 306 care package. We also have Super Squares. I haven't advertised this one yet. The board's coming out right away here. So if you want to get on the Super Squares board, let us know. We'll be able to sell you a square and a chance to win some money and a chance to win some products for charity. So I guess without any further ado, I guess that'll wrap us up here for episode number 116 of the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. Regardless of if you're coming to the Super Bowl watch party event with us and you're gonna have a great time, and if you're not and you're watching at home or watching with family and friends, I hope you enjoy the game. I hope you have fun, as this is going to be our last football game for a very, very long time, unfortunately. So regardless, thank you very much for listening to the episode, everybody. Take care. And it's not too late to donate to charity. Find out on ways to be able to do that on social media. So take care, everybody, and let's talk soon.